Derek White cooked as well. No surprise there. Both of them, White and Brown, had 25 apiece. How about Sam Hauser coming in with 17 points, helping fill that void a little bit with KP out and Jason Tatum a double-double. Bam Adebayo, really the only consistent piece for this team from start to finish. Only played 36 minutes, 23, 5, and 6. Tyler Hero, 15, but on 19 shots. Celtics way too dominant for this Heat squad that has been hampered with injuries all year long. They shot 40% from three, so that also helped. For more reaction to Boston, moving on to the second round, we bring in CBS Sports NBA insider writer Bill Ryder. And Bill, let's say it plainly. Celtics whooped that ass from the first quarter to the fourth. What was most impressive about that, man?
If I had a mic on your behalf, I would drop it and I would walk off the screen because, look, truth alarm going off. It was a beatdown. It was a beatdown. This is the Celtics team we expected to see in this series with no Jimmy Butler, no Jaime Jaquez. I think is a huge loss, especially energy-wise, for Miami. But you said it. That was utter and total domination on both sides of the ball. This is a Celtics team that is extraordinary offensively and defensively. They buried their threes. They attacked on offense. They got points from almost every part of the roster. But I think the most impressive part of this performance was the defense. I mean, they held the Miami Heat to 10% on three-point shots, which is a critical strategy for Miami. They took 29 of them. They hassled them at every step of the way. They were more physical. They wanted it more. As you just noted, Chris, as you just accurately noted, this was a humiliation that the Celtics just leveled on their rival Miami Heat.
Yeah, Miami just had no more energy left because of all those ass whoopings against the Celtics. Now, when you look at the Celtics specifically as far as Derek White and Jaylen Brown, why do you think they were able to get off so quickly, given the fact that Derek White went off in the previous game and it looked like Miami, they didn't have their assignments ready?
Yeah, so there's a few things going on here. First of all, no Jimmy Butler caught up to the Heat. They're obviously exhausted. Their rotations have shrunk. Jaquez is a really important piece of that. But I also think this is just a Celtics team that, having bitterly tasted disappointment the last 2 years in the finals 2 seasons ago and against the Heat in the conference finals last year, they lost the first three, stormed back, and you know the story, then lost on their own home court in Game 7. This is a team that this year, when they focus, utterly destroy teams. And to my eye, and just talking to folks around that Celtics organization, their hope and plan was, let's end this game in the first quarter. Let's end this game in the first 5 minutes with our energy. Let's put this thing out of reach. They didn't just want to beat Miami. They wanted to humiliate them and dominate them as early and quickly as they could, in large part because you want to give these guys time to rest, and in large part because as good as the Celtics are, when they play close games, and we've discussed it, maybe there's a little bit more vulnerability there. This, to me, was a Boston Celtics team that didn't want to mess around, that understood the gulf between what they can do and what the Heat can do on the floor, and decided to apply that from the very first second of a closeout game.
When you shoot 47% from three, that is the definition of being locked in for a closeout game, and in the first half alone. Now, moving ahead, we know Kristaps Porzingis is not going to be available for this team for the next series, whether they face the Magic or the Cavaliers. If you're the Celtics, I know they've been so amazing all year long. Who would you rather face, or really doesn't matter? Both of them are going to get the L's.
It's a great question. I think they're both going to get. I think they're both going to get the L's, and I think there's some similarities in these teams, Chris. They're both great defensively. Orlando's defensive rating, defense, basically, their excellence was third best in the NBA. The Cavs were 6th, and they're both mediocre or worse offensively. I don't know who's going to win Magic Cavs. I still think it could go either way if we get to a Game 7, but I would rather face Orlando, and it's just for this reason. You have not seen Donovan Mitchell get going, not really in this series. Now, he had an amazing fourth quarter to put the Cavs up in this series against the Magic in their last game. He had 14 fourth quarter points. But largely, and that's an important moment, largely he's been pretty unimpressive. Has been inefficient, hasn't shot well. But he is good enough, even against a defense like the Celtics, which, by the way, is even better than both the Magic and the Cavs. Donovan Mitchell's the kind of guy that if he gets hot, can win you a game or two in a series. I don't think there's much of a chance that either of those teams beat the Celtics. But if you're going to, you need somebody to bring some offense on these two teams that don't really produce very much on their own. They don't operate particularly efficiently offensively. They're not very good offensively. That you need guys who can get buckets. So The answer is Cleveland, because we've seen Donovan Mitchell, despite his postseason struggles, put up a 50-burger in the playoffs. We know that he can get hot. We saw that fourth quarter against Orlando. But that's me stretching for an answer, because I think the reality is Boston Celtics have a pretty clear and obvious path to the conference finals.
Yeah, I was going to say, either way, it's going to be a tall order for the Magic or the Cavaliers to take down the Boston Celtics, who are clicking on all cylinders right now. Clearly, the Heat were not on this night. So when we look at them in the offseason, Bill, what do they have to do besides just stay healthy? I feel like that's a conversation we have year after year, where they're just banged up at the wrong time. What do you envision being their plan as they try to get better and make sure they're not in a play-in game or in the play-in game again?
Yeah, they need more talent. You and I were discussing the fact that their NBA Twitter, not everybody, but there's some Eric Spoelstra slander that's percolating out there. And you made the point, it's right when we were talking privately. What's the guy going to do? He does not have enough talent on that roster. Even when Jimmy Butler is healthy, he doesn't have enough talent, regardless of what they did in that magical run last year. So it's not easy. I mean, they've tried to move Tyler Hero on before. That's probably the primary piece that maybe you could get something back for, but it didn't entice at all Portland when Damian Lillard was available last offseason. And it's one game, but Tyler Hero did not cover himself in glory by any stretch of the imagination. There are certainly people around the NBA who think that if the Suns blow things up, or at least try to add some pieces because they're in such a tough spot, maybe Durant's someone they could trade. I'm told the Heat would be interested in that. They would make a move, but it's the same problem they have with Lillard. Do they have enough to really go out and get a player who's going to significantly make the team better? The answer depends on how most GMs evaluate and value Tyler Hero. You're not going to be able to move on from that Duncan Robinson contract. I do like, as I noted, Jaquez, and they certainly like him in Miami, what they think he could be. If Butler's healthy, we know what he is in the playoffs. So it's not an easy path. But the answer, Chris, is you got to go find somebody at a higher talent level, another star, probably a scorer that you can add to Bam and Butler, and try to make this team able to at least a little bit compete with the firepower that we've seen in the Eastern Conference, and certainly we saw in this series from the Boston Celtics.
Pat Riley, Eric Spoelstra are going to have their hands full this offseason to make sure they elevate this team to a point where they're not in the play-in tournament and they actually are in that 1 through 6 range. Bill Ryder, always appreciate talking to you as you break it down.
At the trade deadline, over that stretch, going back to basically March 7th, they had the best defense in the NBA. They had one of the 3 best net ratings in the NBA, and they had the 2nd best record in the NBA. And that was behind exactly what you just talked about. Remarkable D, and Luka and/or Kyrie taking over games and injecting that offense. And we saw the defense in this game, and as you noted, we saw Luka Doncic, who had been self-critical of not giving Kyrie enough offensive help, be an absolute menace to that Clippers team.
Was that the last Clippers game that we see in Crypto.com Arena?
I think it is. I mean, what's really confusing about this team and confusing about the legacies, I think to a large extent of James Harden and to maybe a lesser or still evolving extent of Paul George, is as brutal as those guys were, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, there's a world where Harden and/or PG show up in the next game in Dallas and force a Game 7 and play really well. It's hard to peg. It feels like it. I think Dallas is the better team. We're talking about that defense. That has been largely a consistent factor going back several months now. Luka Doncic looks really comfortable. Kyrie's had a great series. I just think the Mavs are a markedly better basketball team. They're going to be at home. That tracks and makes sense, but it's been such a fun, bizarre, upside-down postseason. You never know.
22 points on 6 of 25. That's the combined numbers of Paul George and James Harden. What are we doing? What are we doing, Bill?
It is an abdication of responsibility, maybe of effort or focus and of excellence. Let me throw in 0 for, I know they sat for big chunks of it, but 0 for 5 in the fourth quarter. The time they were out on the floor, neither guy could hit a bucket. So this has been the reality for James Harden in his career. I know he's a 3-time scoring champion. I understand the guy's won an MVP, and he did define offensive excellence at an individual level for a big chunk of his career when he was in Houston. But he's always been underwhelming in the postseason. And even though he's had some good games, you sort of knew this was coming, the Harden dud game. But to see it in conjunction with Paul George, not a must-win game, but in a really important game, you're at home, you have a chance to maintain home court advantage come what may when you go back to Dallas. I got nothing for you, Akeem, other than this has happened often with Harden and often enough with Paul George. It may be really disappointing. It is not, unfortunately, utterly surprising.
Maybe what it tells you is the big 3 doesn't work anymore. Didn't work in Phoenix, didn't work in Brooklyn, Doesn't look like it's going to work here with the Clippers. The series moves back to Dallas for Game 6 on Friday. Mavs with a chance to close it out. And we'll never see a Clippers game back at Crypto.com Arena. But they have an amazing arena that's opening up. So don't worry, don't cry. There'll be great fans at that arena. Maybe they'll have better players to fill it out. Meantime, the Celtics take care of business. They crushed the Heat. They dismantled the Heat in Game 5. Win the series. Bill, from a Boston perspective, what's your biggest takeaway from this series?
This is how you win basketball games. They don't play particularly well in super close games, but they haven't had to. The reason they're one of the, at least on paper, we'll see what happens this year, on paper, one of the most dominant teams, literally a team in NBA history, is largely because they can destroy teams. They can annihilate your self-confidence. They can hit shot after shot after shot, which they did in this game. They can get contributions offensively from 2, 3, 4 guys, which they did in this game, and they can shut you down defensively. Now, the Heat's poor shooting night is in part because of the Heat, but they got held and harassed to 10% on their three-point shots, and they took almost 30 of them. This is just the excellence of the Celtics, the promise of the Celtics, absolutely encapsulated into a single game. This is as good a 48 minutes of basketball as you can see. And the key, maybe they don't maintain it. They're going to play better teams going forward. They're going to play healthier teams, you presume, going forward. The Heat were missing a bunch of guys. But this was a showcase of what the Celtics can be and why they're the favorite in Vegas and the favorite with a lot of folks to be NBA champions in June.
Boston will play the winner of the Cleveland-Orlando series in the semifinals. Cleveland with a 3-2 lead in that series. As for Miami, what's next for the Heat, Bill?
I mean, nothing easy. Nothing easy. I mean, that Duncan Robinson contract is less than ideal. Tyler Hero did not play well at all in this particular closeout game. He didn't play well at all in this postseason, or at least in the series. And he's got a massive contract for several years to make the moves they'd want to make. This is sort of the Damian Lillard reality revisited. Whoever they try to get, Kevin Durant, it's a big if, Hakeem, if Phoenix wanted to move on from him. Whoever, Donovan Mitchell, there's rumors that he may want to force his way somewhere else. Now, talking to folks around the NBA, he's more been linked with the Knicks or maybe the Lakers, but Miami's always a destination to get a guy like that, to get any of those guys. If you try to go get Trae Young, that's another name that's been tossed out there. Who are you going to offer? Tyler Hero on that contract after that performance? You don't really, I mean, you have draft picks, but the Heat are always good enough that they're not that valuable. There's not an easy solution. They need another star. They need more offense. Look, Jaime Jaquez was awesome and wasn't able to play, so that's promising if you're Miami. And I still think when you have Jimmy Butler, you can be really good. But you don't have the kind of flexibility that make that kind of move easy. They couldn't get Lillard for a reason. And whoever their next version of Lillard is, they're going to be hard to land in the summer, even though they need more help.
Well, it's no surprise that Boston won. When we previewed this series, I told you that the Celtics were minus 8,000 when the series was open to win the series.
That's crazy.
And you said that the Heat would get one. The Heat got one. They got no more.
Got one.
Bill, thanks. Here's a look at the Heat's largest cap hits next season. Jimmy Butler, $48.8 million. $157 million is tied to 5 players next season. Butler, Adebayo, Hero, Rozier, and Robinson. So they got to figure out what they're going to do this offseason. One of the priorities, getting Jimmy Butler healthy going into next season and not have to play in the play-in game. Play in the regular season. Get a better seed so you don't have to play the 1 seed Celtics in the first round. That's what you got to do. Got to take care of business. Got a pair of Game 6s on Thursday, both in the East. Pacers up 3-2 on the Bucks. Giannis and Dame both listed as doubtful. Knicks looking to knock out the 76ers after blowing a late lead in Game 5. New York failed to hold on to a 6-point lead with 28 seconds to play. Also, make your free throws. Back here with Bill Ryder. What we watched on Tuesday was embarrassing.